Krell flexed his 4 primary arms, admiring the reinforced netting in his claws. The trophy room aboard the Venatrix needed a new centerpiece, and today finally he would claim something worth displaying. Behind him his crew of 7 chittered with anticipation, their scales rippling in shades of orange and crimson, the colors of excited predators closing in on a kill. "Scanners confirm biological presence, Captain," announced Voss, his second in command. The younger hunter's tail whipped back and forth, betraying his eagerness despite his attempt at professional composure. Single entity, approximately 65 kilograms. No visible weapons, no armor, no defensive modifications whatsoever. Krell's mandibles clicked in satisfaction. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. The hunting vessel descended through the atmosphere of Kepler 432b, a backwater rock that barely registered on civilized star charts. The place was a nightmare of excessive oxygen, unstable weather patterns, and gravity that pulled just a bit too hard, the kind of planet only desperate colonists or idiots would settle on. And yet here they were, tracking what appeared to be a lone wanderer, separated from whatever pitiful settlement had spawned her. "Deploy the dampening field," Krell ordered. "I want her isolated. No communications. No chance of calling for help. Not that anything on this miserable rock could save her anyway." The ship's belly opened, and Krell dropped through the hatch, his boots crunching against the orange-red soil. The air tasted wrong, too thick, too rich, burning slightly as it filled his respiratory slits. How anything survived breathing this toxic mixture was beyond his comprehension. The gravity made each step feel like he was wearing training weights. This planet was hostile to civilized life, yet the readings insisted something lived here, willingly. There, through the clustered rock formations he spotted movement. A human. Krell had heard stories about humans, of course. Everyone had. They came from a planet called Earth, a death world by any reasonable standard, and they had somehow convinced themselves they belonged among the stars. They were weak, fragile things, soft skin, no natural armor, no claws, no venom, no protective scales, just pale, thin flesh stretched over brittle bones. The fact that they had achieved space travel at all was a cosmic joke, a statistical anomaly that the universe would eventually correct. And here was a female specimen even more delicate than the males, if the intelligence reports were accurate. She was small, maybe 1.7 meters tall, with long dark hair pulled back from her face. She wore simple clothing, nothing reinforced, nothing that suggested combat capability. She carried a pack on her back and appeared to be collecting samples from the rock pools scattered across the plateau. A scientist, perhaps. Or just a fool with too much curiosity and not enough survival instinct. "Surround her," Krell commanded through his comm unit. "Tighten the circle. I want her trapped before she even knows we are here." His crew moved with practiced efficiency. 7 hunters against 1 unarmed target. The odds were almost insulting, but Krell had not survived 4 decades of hunting by taking chances. Overkill was just kill with a higher success rate. The human looked up. Her eyes, strange forward-facing things, locked onto Krell's position. For a moment, just a fraction of a second, he saw something flicker across her face. Not fear, not yet. Something else. Assessment, maybe. Calculation. Then his crew closed in, and she did exactly what he expected. She ran. "After her!" Krell roared, the thrill of the chase igniting every nerve in his body. The human sprinted across the uneven terrain with surprising speed, her legs pumping, her arms swinging for balance. But it was hopeless. Laughably hopeless. Krell's species had been hunting prey across 17 star systems for generations. This soft, weak creature stood no chance. Voss launched the net from the flank. A perfect throw. The reinforced mesh, spread wide, its weighted edges wrapping around the human's legs. She went down hard, hitting the ground with a cry of pain that made Krell's mandibles click in satisfaction. They had her. She struggled against the netting, her small hands pulling uselessly at the carbon fiber weave. Her breathing came in rapid gasps, her chest heaving, and then she did something that made the entire crew burst into derisive laughter. She screamed. Not a battle cry. Not a threat. Not even a coherent word. Just a high-pitched, terrified scream that echoed across the barren plateau. "Oh, that is precious," wheezed Moxer, clutching his midsection as he laughed. "She thinks someone will hear her. Out here, on this worthless rock. That is adorable." The human screamed again, louder this time, her voice cracking with apparent desperation. Krell approached slowly, savoring the moment. He stood over her, his shadow falling across her pale face. Tears streaked her cheeks. Her body trembled. She looked up at him with those bizarre forward-facing eyes, and he saw exactly what he wanted to see. Pure, unadulterated terror. "Welcome to the collection, little human," he said, knowing she could not understand his language. "You are going to look magnificent on my wall." She opened her mouth and screamed again. The crew laughed harder. The holding cell hummed with containment fields, blue energy crackling across the transparent barriers. Inside, the human sat on the floor, knees pulled to her chest, head down. She looked even smaller now, confined in the sterile chamber. Pathetic. Really. Krell wondered why he had even bothered. Perhaps mounting her would seem less like a trophy and more like bullying. But the crew was celebrating, and he would not dampen their enthusiasm. "Bring the fermentation pods," shouted Grix, the weapons specialist. His scales flushed deep purple with intoxication. "We are drinking to Krell's newest acquisition." The trophy room was the pride of the Venatrix, a vast chamber lined with preserved specimens from across the galaxy. Krell's collection represented 30 years of hunting, each creature more dangerous than the last. There was the Thorian berserker from Sigma 9, all 3 meters of fur and muscle frozen mid-roar. The crystalline serpent from the ice moons of Vendax, its fangs still dripping preserved venom. The 6-legged apex predator from Verfradrax Prime, its claws extended as if still reaching for prey. And now, a human. The softest, weakest addition to his collection yet. "Tell me again," Moxar slurred, pressing his face close to the containment field. "How much did she weigh?" 65 kilograms. My hatchlings weigh more than that." The human lifted her head slightly. Her eyes were red, swollen from crying. "Good." Fear meant adrenaline, and adrenaline meant the preservation process would capture that terrified expression perfectly. She would look beautiful mounted on the wall, forever frozen in her final moment of despair. "She cried the entire flight back," Voss added, refilling his pod with amber liquid. "Blubbering like a newly spawned juvenile. I almost felt bad for her." "Alma." Krell clicked his mandibles in amusement. "She is prey. Prey does not deserve sympathy. Prey deserves to be displayed so that others might admire the hunter's skill." The human's mouth opened. At first Krell thought she was going to cry again. Her lips trembled, her jaw worked, and her eyes squeezed shut. But what came out was not sobbing. It was a sound. Low at first, barely audible over the crew's raucous celebration. A single sustained note that seemed to vibrate in her chest. Then it changed, rising and falling in a pattern that made Krell's ear membranes twitch uncomfortably. "What is she doing?" Grix asked, his laughter dying. The human's voice grew louder. Not screaming. This time, something else. Something rhythmic. Her throat worked, producing sounds that seemed to overlap, harmonics layering over each other in ways that should not be possible from a single vocal apparatus. "Maybe it is a prayer," Voss suggested. "Some primitive religious ritual. They probably have gods for everything. God of bad decisions. God of getting captured by superior species." The crew laughed, but Krell noticed several of them had moved away from the containment field. The sound was unsettling, he had to admit. It resonated at a frequency that made his scales itch. The human paused, drew a deep breath, and the sound changed again. This time it was higher, sharper, modulating in rapid bursts. Her whole body tensed with the effort, her hands clenched into fists, her face contorting. "She sounds like a dying engine," Moxar observed, draining his pod. "Someone shut her up. The noise is ruining the celebration." Krell approached the control panel and activated the vocal suppression field. A green light blinked, indicating the system was active. The technology worked by disrupting airflow, making speech impossible. The human kept making sounds. Krell's claws hovered over the controls. That should not be possible. The suppression field was specifically designed to prevent vocalizations. He checked the readings. The field was working perfectly, registering full power, complete coverage of the containment area. Yet the human continued her strange, patterned noise-making. "How is she doing that?" Voss asked, moving closer to the readouts. His earlier amusement had vanished, replaced by professional concern. "I do not know," Krell admitted. "The field should be preventing any sound production. Unless what? Unless she is not using her vocal cords the way we assumed." The human's eyes snapped open. She stared directly at Krell, and something in her expression had changed. The terror was still there. Yes, but underneath it something else lurked. Something that made his predator instincts suddenly scream warning signals his conscious mind had not yet processed. She was not panicking. She was focused. The sounds continued, rising and falling in complex patterns. Her body swayed slightly, keeping rhythm with something only she could hear. Her lips moved, forming shapes that suggested language, but the sounds coming out were too layered, too complex, too deliberately structured. "It sounds like code," Grick said slowly. "Like a transmission." "Impossible," Krell snapped. "We deployed the dampening field. No signals can leave the ship. And even if they could, who would she be calling? This is an isolated system. There are no human colonies within 3 light years. No human vessels. No stations. Nothing." The human smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. It was the smile of someone who knew something important. Something her captors had missed. Her vocalizations intensified, the patterns becoming more complex, more urgent. "Captain," Voss said, his voice tight. "I recommend we sedate her. Now." Krell's claw moved toward the sedation controls. But before he could activate them, the ship's alarm system erupted in a cascade of warning tones. The human stopped making sounds. She sat back against the wall of her cell, chest heaving, sweat coating her pale skin. And she waited. Red emergency lights bathed the trophy room in crimson. The alarm wailed, a pulsing shriek that sent Krell's crew scrambling for their stations. Celebration forgotten, fermentation pods clattered to the floor, spilling their contents across the polished deck. "Report," Krell barked, his claws already moving across the command interface embedded in his trophy room wall. Every chamber on the Venatrix had emergency access to ship systems, a paranoid design choice that was suddenly proving its worth. "Multiple system failures, Captain," called Voss from his position at the secondary console. His scales had gone pale gray, the color of deep fear. "Navigation is offline, weapons array is not responding. Life support is fluctuating. And the dampening field, the one we deployed to isolate this system, it just collapsed." "Collapsed? That is a military-grade dampener. It does not just collapse." "Well, it did. 3 seconds ago. Complete failure across all frequencies." Krell's mind raced. Simultaneous system failures did not happen by accident. Not on a ship as well maintained as the Venatrix. Someone or something was attacking them. But how? They were alone in this system. The sensors had shown nothing. No ships, no stations, no threat. A sound echoed through the hull. It was faint at first, barely perceptible over the alarm. A rhythmic thumping like something striking the outer armor. Slow, deliberate, each impact resonating through the ship's superstructure.
"What is that?"
Moxar asked, his weapon already drawn, though what good a plasma rifle would do against something outside the ship was questionable. "Scanning," Voss replied, his claws flying over the controls. "I am getting readings, but they make no sense. Multiple objects, close proximity, moving patterns. They are surrounding us." The human laughed. It was not hysterical laughter, not the mad cackling of someone broken by fear. It was quiet, knowing, almost gentle. She remained seated in her cell, watching them with those forward-facing predator eyes, and she laughed like someone watching a performance they had seen before. "Shut her up," Grix snarled, raising his rifle toward the containment field. "Belay that," Krell commanded. "I want her conscious. I want answers." He strode to the containment field, his full height of 2.3 meters towering over the seated human. She did not flinch, did not cower. She simply looked up at him and smiled, that same unsettling smile from before. "What did you do?" Krell demanded, knowing she probably could not understand him but needing to ask anyway. "What are you?" The human tilted her head, as if considering whether to respond. Then she opened her mouth and began making sounds again. But these were different. Not the complex, layered harmonics from before. These were words. Actual words in Galactic standard, heavily accented but unmistakably clear. "I called my family." Krell's blood went cold. "You speak standard?" "I speak 7 languages," the human replied, her voice hoarse from the earlier vocalizations. "Standard is actually one of my weaker ones. I am better at Mandarin, and Xhosa, and the clicking languages of the Vextari traders. But you know what I am really good at?" She paused, and the thumping against the hull grew louder. "Infrasound communication." "That is not possible," Voss said, but his voice lacked conviction. Biological entities cannot generate infrasound at transmission strength. The power requirements alone would require modifications, yes. The human interrupted. Genetic modifications, vocal cord augmentation, resonance chamber implants, subharmonic generators in the chest cavity. All standard equipment for humans operating in deep space exploration, especially those of us who work alone in dangerous territory. The ship shuddered. Something massive had just struck the hull. You were transmitting through our dampening field, Krell said slowly, pieces falling into place. That is why the suppression field did not work. You were not using normal vocal range. Correct. Your dampening field blocks standard electromagnetic frequencies, radio, quantum entanglement comms, even basic laser pulse. But infrasound, she shook her head. Infrasound travels through solid matter, through atmosphere, through vacuum if the frequency is low enough. It is how whales communicated across Earth's oceans. It is how elephants talked across savannas, and it is how humans in my line of work call for help when conventional communication is blocked. Help from where? Moxar demanded. There is nothing in this system. The human's smile widened. There was not anything in this system when you scanned 3 hours ago. But my family moves fast when one of us is in danger. And I have been transmitting my location, your ship signature, and a priority distress code since the moment you netted me on that plateau. The alarms changed pitch. New warnings cascaded across every display. Captain, Voss's voice cracked with panic. Sensors just came back online. I have multiple contacts. Correction. Dozens of contacts. No, wait. Hundreds. They are appearing all around us. Ships, fighters, destroyers, capital-class vessels. Where did they come from? How did they? Slip space, the human said calmly. We call it the Murphy Drive. Humanity's gift to faster-than-light travel. We can drop out of slip space with pinpoint accuracy and zero warning. Very useful for surprise attacks, or surprise rescues. She stood up, brushing dust from her clothing with exaggerated care. You made 3 mistakes today, she continued, her voice carrying over the chaos erupting around them. First, you assumed I was alone. Humans are never alone. We are pack hunters. Social creatures. We take care of our own. Second, you assumed I was prey. And third, the biggest mistake of all, the thumping on the hull stopped. Silence fell over the ship, more terrifying than any alarm. Then came a new sound. The shriek of metal being torn apart. The hiss of cutting torches. The methodical, unstoppable sound of something breaching the Venatrix's hull. You assumed, the human said quietly, that screaming meant fear. Krell's claws trembled on his weapon. Around him his crew stood frozen, listening to the sounds of their ship being systematically disassembled from the outside. The human began making sounds again, the same complex patterns as before. But now Krell understood what he was hearing. She was not screaming. She was talking, and someone, something, was answering back. The main viewport flickered to life, overriding Krell's control systems. Someone outside wanted them to see, wanted them to understand exactly how badly they had miscalculated. Space was no longer empty. Where there had been nothing but stars and the dim orange glow of Kepler 42b, there now hung a fleet. Not a patrol, not a search party. A full military battle group. Krell's training allowed him to identify ship classes even through his rising panic. Destroyers, frigates, carrier vessels bristling with launch bays, and at the center, dwarfing everything else, a dreadnought that looked like it could crack a planet in half. By the ancestors, Grix whispered. How many ships is that? 237, Voss read from his display, his voice hollow. 237 combat vessels, plus support craft, plus what looks like boarding shuttles. So many boarding shuttles. That is an invasion force, Moxar said. That is the kind of fleet you bring to conquer a star system. Not rescue one person, not one single soft weak. She is not weak, Krell interrupted, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. We were wrong, we were catastrophically, fatally wrong. The human in the containment cell continued her vocalizations, but now Krell could hear the structure in them. The patterns. She was communicating in real time, transmitting through the hull, through space itself, coordinating with the fleet that surrounded them. Every rise and fall of her voice carried information, distance, threat assessment, status updates. She was not a victim crying for help. She was a soldier reporting to her unit. A new voice filled the bridge, transmitted through every speaker on the Venatrix simultaneously. It was human, male, speaking perfect Galactic standard with an accent that suggested military training. Attention identified vessel, you are completely surrounded by the 3rd Expeditionary Fleet of the Terran Colonial Marines. You are holding one of our people against her will. You have precisely 60 seconds to power down all weapon systems. Drop your shield and prepare for boarding. If you comply, you will be detained and processed according to Galactic Convention protocols. If you resist, we will tear your ship apart, molecule by molecule until we reach her. Your choice. Clock starts now. Krell's mandibles clicked involuntarily. Terran Colonial Marines. He knew that designation. Every hunter in the known galaxy knew it. They were the ones who had fought the Kryn swarm to a standstill at the Battle of Proxima. They were the ones who had held the line at the Omega Rift when 3 separate hostile species tried to push into human space simultaneously. They were the ones who did not lose. They were the ones who did not engage unless you wanted to die. Captain, orders? Voss asked. But Krell could hear the defeat already settling into his second-in-command's voice. Rerun, Krell said. Full power to engines. Jump calculation to the nearest slip point. Rerun right now. But the human. Forget the human. She is not worth dying for. Voss's claws moved across the controls. Nothing happened. He tried again, inputting emergency override codes. Still nothing. Captain, engines are locked. Navigation is locked. Weapons are locked. Everything is locked. They have complete control of our systems. That is impossible. This ship has military-grade security. Firewalls. Isolated systems. They cannot. They already did, the human said from her cell. She had stopped vocalizing and now stood with her arms crossed, watching them with something that looked disturbingly like pity. You powered on your communication systems when your dampening field dropped. Big mistake. Human electronic warfare capabilities are about 3 generations ahead of anything else in the galaxy. We do not break into systems. We walk in through the front door, change all the locks, and make ourselves comfortable. The cutting sounds from the hull grew louder. Closer. They were coming from multiple directions now, a coordinated breach pattern designed to hit the ship from 6 different vectors simultaneously. 45 seconds, the voice on the speakers announced. I should mention, the person you took is Lieutenant Eva Martinez, xenobiologist assigned to the Colonial Survey Team on Kepler. She is also the daughter of Admiral Marcus Martinez, who happens to command this fleet. He is having what you might call a very bad day. I strongly suggest you make the next 40 seconds count. Admiral's daughter. They had kidnapped an Admiral's daughter. Krell wanted to laugh, or scream, or both. His entire crew had been bragging about taking down prey, mounting a trophy, celebrating their hunting prowess, and the entire time they had been painting a target on their own backs. We did not know. Krell shouted at the containment field, at Eva, at the fleet outside, at the universe itself for its cosmic sense of irony. We thought you were alone. We thought you were just some soft colonist wandering too far from safety. I was collecting geological samples, Eva replied, her tone conversational, almost friendly. It is my job. I go to potentially habitable planets and analyze soil composition, mineral content, atmospheric compatibility. I have been doing it for 6 years, and in 6 years I have been kidnapped 4 times by species who thought humans looked like easy prey. 4 times. 4 times. You are actually showing more intelligence than the last group. They tried to fight back when my unit arrived. That did not end well for them. The wreckage is still floating around Tau Ceti if you want to go look. The cutting sound stopped. Heavy footsteps echoed through the corridors of the Venatrix, synchronized, professional, unstoppable. Whoever was coming knew exactly where they were going and did not care about stealth. 20 seconds, the voice announced. Weapons powered down would be good right about now. Grix dropped his rifle. Then Moxar. Then the rest of the crew, weapons clattering to the floor in a cascade of surrender. Krell stood frozen, his predator's pride warring with his survival instinct. Everything he had built, his reputation, his collection, his career as the galaxy's most feared hunter, was evaporating in real time. Why? He asked Eva, genuine confusion cutting through his terror. Why do humans even live on death worlds? Why explore dangerous planets? Why put yourselves in situations where you can be captured? Eva tilted her head, considering the question. Because someone has to. Because the universe is dangerous and beautiful and full of things worth seeing. Because we are curious. Because we can. And because no matter how far we wander, no matter how isolated we seem, we know the truth. What truth? The doors to the trophy room exploded inward. Smoke poured through the opening, and through it came figures in black armor. Weapons raised, moving with the fluid precision of apex predators who had found their prey. Eva smiled. Humanity never leaves its people behind. The containment field around her cell died, the blue energy flickering out. She stepped through the empty space, stretching her arms over her head as if waking from a pleasant nap. "Hello, boys," she called to the armored figures. "Took you long enough." I was getting bored. One of the soldiers lowered his weapon and pulled off his helmet. He was huge, easily 2 meters tall, with dark skin and eyes that had seen too much combat. A scar ran down his left cheek, and his expression was the practiced calm of someone holding back volcanic rage through sheer professional discipline. "You okay, Eva?" "I am fine, Sergeant Powell, just a little annoyed. This is the second time this month. Dad is going to have opinions about my choice of career." "Your dad already has opinions. Most of them involve locking you in a bunker until you are 80. Eva laughed, then turned back to Krell and his crew. The soldiers had them surrounded, weapons trained with perfect accuracy on every member of the hunting party. "For what it is worth," she said to Krell, "you are not the worst kidnappers I have encountered. You fed me. You did not try to torture me for information. You just made one simple, understandable mistake." "What mistake?" Krell asked, though he already knew the answer. "You thought screaming meant weakness," Eva said. "In the human world, screaming means someone is coming, and they are going to be very, very angry." The armored humans moved through the Venatrix like they owned it. No hesitation. No uncertainty. They swept through Krell's trophy room with the efficiency of soldiers who had done this 1,000 times before, cataloging every specimen, every mounted creature, every piece of his carefully curated collection. "Sir, you need to see this," one of the soldiers called out. His nameplate read, Chen. He stood before the Thorian berserker, the 3-meter monster frozen in eternal rage. "This is a Category 5 protected species. Hunting these has been illegal for 2 decades. Sergeant Powell approached, his expression darkening. "Tag it. Tag everything. We are documenting all of this." "Wait," Krell said, finding his voice despite the plasma rifles pointed at his chest. "That is my collection. Those are legally obtained trophies from sanctioned hunts across multiple—" "Shut up," Powell said without raising his voice. The command carried absolute authority. "You lost your right to speak when you put your hands on one of ours." Another soldier, a woman with red hair and cybernetic implants running down her left arm, was scanning the walls with handheld equipment. "Captain, I am getting biosignatures. Multiple species. Some of these are still alive." Krell's stomach dropped. Alive? That was impossible. His preservation techniques were perfect. Nothing survived the stasis process. Nothing could. "Row 7, Chamber 12, the woman continued. "Faint heartbeat. Neural activity. This one is conscious." Eva walked past Krell. Her earlier fear completely vanished. In its place was something clinical, professional, cold. She moved to row 7 and peered into the transparent chamber the soldier had indicated. Inside was a small reptilian creature, no bigger than her hand, its eyes moving frantically despite its frozen body. "A Quelix juvenile," Eva said quietly. "They are sentient, fully sentient. They have language, culture, family structures, and you kept this one alive in stasis so it would look fresh." She turned to face Krell, and the look in her eyes made him wish the humans had just blown his ship apart instead of boarding it. "How many others?" she asked. The red-haired soldier checked her scanner. 17, showing signs of preserved consciousness. He has been keeping sentient beings in living stasis. Aware, unable to move, unable to die. Some of these readings suggest they have been like this for years. The trophy room fell silent, except for the hum of equipment and the soft footsteps of soldiers documenting evidence. Krell's crew had gone completely still, their scales pale with terror. They were beginning to understand that being captured was not the worst thing that could happen to them. Powell spoke into his comm unit. "Admiral, you need to come see this. Now." "Already on my way," a new voice crackled back. "Is my daughter secure?" "Yes, sir. Not a scratch on her. But we have a situation." The situation, Krell realized with dawning horror, was that he had not just kidnapped a human. He had kidnapped a human while actively committing 17 counts of torture against sentient species. The Galactic Convention had very specific laws about this, very specific punishment. Heavy footsteps approached from the corridor. The soldiers immediately straightened, snapping to attention with military precision. Through the smoke and debris walked a man who made Sergeant Powell look small by comparison. He was massive, easily 2.2 meters of muscle and scar tissue poured into an admiral's uniform. His hair was steel gray, his face was carved from granite, and his eyes locked onto Eva with an intensity that would have melted hull plating. "Hey, Dad," Eva said, giving him a small wave. Admiral Marcus Martinez crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled his daughter into a hug that looked like it could crush bones. For a moment the terrifying military commander disappeared, replaced by a father who had just gotten his child back. "You are grounded," he said into her hair. "Grounded until you are 40. Maybe 50. I am putting you on a nice safe space station with guards and surveillance and absolutely nothing that can kidnap you." "You say that every time," Eva replied, her voice muffled against his chest. "And every time you ignore me and go back to surveying death worlds and getting captured by idiots who do not know what humans are capable of." He released her, checked her over for injuries with a father's practiced eye, then turned his attention to Krell. The warmth evaporated instantly. What remained was the cold calculation of a military strategist who had just identified a problem that needed solving. "You are Krell, I presume, captain of this vessel, owner of this collection." Krell tried to stand tall, tried to maintain some shred of dignity. "I am, and I demand to know by what authority you breach my ship, assault my crew." Admiral Martinez held up one hand. Krell's voice died in his throat. "I am going to explain something to you," the Admiral said, his voice calm, almost gentle, "and I want you to listen very carefully because your life depends on understanding what I am about to say." He gestured to the trophy room, to the mounted creatures, to the 17 beings trapped in living stasis. Humanity spent 200,000 years clawing our way up from the bottom of the food chain. We were prey once, small, weak, soft. Everything on our planet wanted to eat us. So we learned to hunt. We learned to coordinate. We learned to plan. We learned to make tools and weapons and strategies. We became so good at hunting that we drove dozens of species to extinction before we even understood what extinction meant. He took a step closer to Krell. Then we went to space, and we found the galaxy full of species who thought we were prey, who thought we were weak, who thought they could take one of us and mount us on their walls. Another step. Do you know what happened to those species? Krell could not speak, could not move. Every predator instinct in his body was screaming at him that he was facing something far more dangerous than he had ever imagined. Some of them learned, the Admiral continued. They apologized. They made reparations. They joined the galactic community and never touched another human again. Those species are still around, still thriving, still trading with Earth and our colonies. He stopped directly in front of Krell, towering over him despite Krell's own considerable height. The others did not learn. They kept hunting us, kept treating us like prey, kept thinking that because we are soft and small and weak we must be easy targets. The Admiral leaned in close. Those species do not exist anymore. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Now, the Admiral said, straightening up, his voice returning to professional tones. You are going to cooperate fully with my Marines. You are going to release every living being in this collection. You are going to provide detailed records of every hunt, every capture, every kill, and then you are going to stand trial in front of a galactic tribunal for crimes against sentient species. If you cooperate, you might live long enough to see the inside of a prison cell. If you resist, my daughter files a report saying you died during the rescue attempt, and nobody asks questions. Do we understand each other? Krell nodded, his vocal cords refusing to function. Good. The Admiral turned to Sergeant Powell. Get those stasis chambers open. Get medical teams in here. I want every survivor treated and returned to their homeworlds. And get forensics to document everything. I want an airtight case. Yes, sir. The Admiral looked back at Krell one last time. You made a lot of mistakes today. But the biggest one was not recognizing what you were dealing with. My daughter was not screaming because she was afraid. She was screaming because she knew we would hear her, because she knew we would come. Because she knew that no matter where she is, no matter how isolated, no matter how dangerous the situation, humanity will move heaven and hell to bring our people home. He put his arm around Eva's shoulders. We protect our own. Always. And anyone who forgets that learns the lesson exactly once. Father and daughter walked out of the trophy room together, leaving Krell and his crew surrounded by armed Marines and the ruins of everything they had built. Voss spoke quietly from where he knelt on the floor. "Captain, what do we do?" Krell looked at his claws, at his weapons lying uselessly on the ground, at his precious collection being systematically dismantled by creatures he had dismissed as prey. "We survive," he said. "If they let us." 3 months later, Krell sat in a detention cell on Station Omega-7, awaiting his tribunal. The cell was small, clean, and utterly humiliating. No bars, no guards visible, just a force field and the knowledge that he was being watched every moment of every day. Voss sat across from him, hunched over, his scales dull with stress. Of the original crew, only 4 had survived to face trial. Grix had tried to fight during the initial boarding. That had lasted exactly 2 seconds. Moxar had attempted to access a weapon during processing. The Marines had been less patient with him. "They released the Quelix Juvenile yesterday," Voss said quietly. "I saw it on the news feeds. Full ceremony. Representatives from the Quelix homeworld. Speeches about justice and interspecies cooperation. They made us look like monsters." "We were monsters," Krell replied. He had done a lot of thinking in his cell. Too much thinking. We just did not know it. How could we have known? We were following hunting traditions that go back generations. Our ancestors never met humans, Krell interrupted. They never encountered a species that looks soft, but thinks in pack coordination. That appears weak, but commands technology 3 generations beyond our own. That seems isolated, but can summon a fleet in under 3 hours. He stared at the force field, watching the subtle energy patterns ripple across its surface. Human technology. Efficient, elegant, terrifyingly effective. "I have been reading the data files they let us access," Krell continued. "Learning about Earth. Do you know what their planet is classified as? A death world. Everyone knows that. No, not just a death world. A Class 12 death world. 12, Voss. There are only 17 known Class 12 planets in the entire galaxy, and humans evolved on one of them. Everything on their planet tried to kill them. The predators, the diseases, the weather, the plants, even the water in their oceans was filled with creatures that could swallow them whole." Voss said nothing. "And they did not just survive," Krell went on. "They thrived. They conquered their entire planet. They tamed animals that could tear them apart. They built cities in climates that should have killed them. They went to space in primitive chemical rockets that had a 30% failure rate. And they went anyway because they were curious about what was out there." "What is your point?" "My point is that we assumed weakness meant prey. But weakness is not the same as helplessness. Humans are weak individually. Soft, fragile, easy to hurt. But they are never individuals. They are always part of a pack, a family, a unit, a species that will cross the galaxy to retrieve one of their own." The force field shimmered. A guard appeared. "Human, young, professional. Tribunal is ready for you. Time to go." Krell stood slowly, his limbs aching from months of confinement. As he walked toward his judgment, he thought about Eva Martinez calmly standing in her cell making sounds he had dismissed as panic. She had not been afraid. She had been calling her family, and her family had answered with overwhelming force. The Galactic Tribunal was already in session when they arrived. Representatives from 47 species filled the chamber, including, Krell noted with a twinge of shame, 7 Krellix diplomats. The evidence against him was overwhelming. The testimony was damning. The verdict was never in doubt. Guilty on all counts. Life imprisonment on a penal colony with the possibility of parole in 60 years if he demonstrated genuine rehabilitation. Krell accepted the sentence without protest. He was alive, given what he had done, given who he had taken. That was more mercy than he deserved. As the guards led him away, he passed a viewing screen showing real-time feeds from across the galaxy. News networks, trade channels, diplomatic communications, and on every single one somewhere in the broadcast was the same warning that had been spreading since his capture. A simple message passed from species to species, from station to station, from hunter to hunter across the known stars. Do not touch the humans. They look weak. They look soft. They look like prey. They are not. Humans are pack hunters from a death world who conquered their planet through cooperation, tool-making, and relentless determination. They are curious, compassionate, and fiercely protective of their own. They will go anywhere, explore anything, and face any danger because that is what their species does. And if you take one of them, if you hurt one of them, if you mistake their screams for weakness instead of communication, they will come for you. Not with rage, not with chaos, with precision, with overwhelming force, with the calm certainty of apex predators who have been hunting in packs for 200,000 years. Krell had learned this lesson the hard way. He hoped others would be smarter than he had been, but he suspected they would not be. There would always be hunters who saw soft skin and assumed easy prey, who heard screaming and thought they heard fear. They would learn eventually. Everyone did, usually right before the humans arrived.